Good morning and namaste to all of you. Let's start our Saturday class with some mantras first. Om Parthaye Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayan Swayam Vyasen Grathitam Puran Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritvarshine Bhagavate Mashtadashadhyayane Amutvam Anusandhame Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshine नमो अस्तु ते व्यास विशाल बुद्धे फुल अरविंद आयत पत्र नेत्र येन तव्या भारत तैल पूर्णः प्रज्वलितो ज्ञानमया प्रदीपः परपान पारी जाताये तोत्र वेत्र एक पाने ज्ञान मुद्राये कृष्णाये गीता अमृत दुहे नमः सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दुग्धा गोपाल नंदना पार्थो वत्सा सुधीर भोक्ता दुग्धम गीता अमृतम महत् वसुदेव सुतम देवम कंस चानूरमर्दनम देवकी परमानंदम कृष्णम वंदे जगद्गुरुम भीष्म द्रोण तटा जयद्रथ चला गांधार नीलोत्पला शल्य ग्रावती कृपेन वाणी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थाम विकर्ण घोरमकरा दुर्योधन अवर्तनी सो तीर्णा खलु पांडवै रन नदी कवर्तका केशवा पाराशरे वत्सरोज अमलम गीता अर्थगंधोटकम नानाख्यानक केसरम हरि कथा संबोधन अबोधितम लोके सज्जन षटपद रह रह पेपिये मानम मुदा भूयाद भारत पंकजम कलिमल प्रध्वंसी न श्रेयसे मूकम करोति वाचालम पंगुम लंघ्यते गिरं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानंद माधवम यम ब्रह्म वरुण इंद्र रुद्र मरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यस्तवे वेदै साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदै गायन्ति यम सामगा ज्ञानवस्थे तद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यम योगिनो यस्यन्तं न विदुषुर असुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः. We're going to look at chapter 16 today of Bhagavad Gita. And the title of this chapter is Daiva Asura Sampat Vibhaga Yoga. Okay, and you know Daiva, that means the divine, Asura, demonic. So in this chapter, Lord Krishna is explaining or giving us, or enumerating, I should say, the qualities of the divine beings and qualities of demonic beings. Okay. As we know that irrespective of the race or the tongue or the creed, a good man is a good man now. Okay. So these are the qualities which are universal qualities he's talking about. And the list he is giving it to us not to judge others, but to look within. How can we improve? What are those qualities which are so demonic, so devilish, I should say, we need to get rid of? The same qualities accepted as virtues thousands of years ago are still regarded as virtues even today. Okay, that's why they are considered universal values. Place or time doesn't have any effect on that. So these qualities are for all the mankind, entire mankind of all times and ages. You will see that this is a result of a very scientific observation made in the physical, mental, and intellectual behavior in a human being. Lord Krishna says in the very first verse, he just starts out with the qualities. Qualities of a Deva first, the divine qualities. Fearless, purity of heart, steadfast in the yoga of knowledge, charity giving, control of the senses, sacrifice, study of the scriptures, austerity, and straightforwardness. So these are the noble traits in a cultured person, in a noble man, a noble person. And we see that in the very first verse, fearlessness comes first. Fear is the expression of avidya. Avidya means ignorance. When we don't know our true nature, we are afraid. Whenever we consider the other person as other, separate from us, we are afraid. So he says fearlessness. The more union we have, the less fear we have. So the true ethical perfection in a person is directly proportional to the spiritual involvement. So that means we got to cultivate these ethical values, moral values. That's how we build our foundation. We got to understand these words and bring these qualities in our personality. But he doesn't stop there. In the second verse, he says, harmlessness, truth, absence of anger, renunciation, peacefulness, absence of crookedness, compassion to beings, non-greedy, gentleness, modesty, absence of fickleness. Lord Krishna enumerates the mental contents of the godly type of a person. Moreover, he says in the verse number 3, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, purity, absence of hatred, absence of pride. These belongs to the one born for the divine estate, O Arjuna. So he's almost painting a picture of a divine person. This is the nature of a heart of that person. Or he is listing the mental attitudes, intellectual caliber, and the spiritual glow. So these first 3 verses, that's what that is. And I'm sure some of these terms are very familiar to you because we already discussed those in chapter 12, qualities of a devotee, or even in a chapter 3. Okay, and here and there also. So that's why some people say there's a repetition, but repetition is needed. And right now he's telling us exactly, just clearly telling us that these are the qualities we need to cultivate. In verse number 3, the very first word is tej. See, sometimes these terms, when we know in Sanskrit, they are clear to us if we know that language. When we translate into English, somehow the meaning goes away. Tej is not a physical glow. So in English, tej is normally translated as vigor, but it's a glow. It's not just exterior beauty of a person, but when we tend the physical situation carefully, that glow of spirituality is seen on our face. That's why often we say a person is glowing inside and outside also. When we look at those divine beings, that is like a personality of a sage. There's an abundant energy. That's why I said it's a vigor. There's no obstruction at any level. And then there's another word in there, atimanita. That is the last word in the first line. Atimanta means doesn't need any respect from anybody else. That's the only way this person can feel light as a feather, can achieve a lot more than average person. So altogether, these are 26 qualities is a complete picture of a nature of a divine estate. Who has a divine estate? That means the divine qualities. So he said Sampat. Sampat word means estate. So 26 qualities. You can just write them down and judge yourself. Where do you stand? What do you need to improve? Where work needs to be done? Okay? And that is the right way of living. So at the physical level, mental level, intellectual level. Now in the verse number 4, he is describing the demonic qualities. Hypocrisy, arrogance, and self-conceit, anger, and also harshness and ignorance. He says belongs to one who is born or birth for a demonic estate. So hypocrisy, in Sanskrit is called dambha. That means pretending to be righteous, but living opposite of that. It's like a superficially we want to portray to others that we are good people. But we are covering our ugly intentions. So that's dambha. Then the second word over there is darpa. Darpa means endless pride of learning. Or it could be of wealth. Or even it could be a social status. Or family connections. So a person like that lives in the world of imagined self-importance. That's why this kind of a person could be in the middle of a crowd, but internally very lonely. So these are demonic qualities he's mentioning over here. Then he says in the verse number 5, the divine nature is deemed for liberation. And liberation doesn't mean at the end of this human life, even while living, you feel free. You don't feel burdened. Divine nature is deemed for liberation, the demonic for bondage. Then he must have seen on Arjun's face, where do I belong? He says, grieve not, O Pandav, you are born with divine qualities. Okay? So he's consoling his friend, his cousin, that you do have divine qualities. Grieve not. Several places in Bhagavad Gita we see this word, grieve not. Ma shucha. To become sentimental and desperate or to exhaust ourselves in self-pity or self-condemnation, it's truly a psychological malady. When we suffer from this malady, we can never discover ourselves, our true self. Because our energy is sapped with this kind of a malady. We don't have a confidence in ourselves. We cannot be steady in whatever we do. So that's why he kept saying earlier also, and he will keep on telling us several more times, Ma shucha, do not grieve. Grief is a tamasic state of mind. Then in the verse number 6, he says, there are two types of beings. So Lord Krishna is scientifically analyzing this whole area over here. He says there are two types of beings in this world, the divine and the demonic. The divine have been described at length here from me, O part of the demonic. So even though he gave in this verse number 4 some of the characteristics of a demonic person, but he says, let me tell you a little bit more. The demonic does not know what to do and what to refrain from. Neither purity nor right conduct, nor truth is found in them. Okay? With that kind of a confused mind, arrogant mind, you really don't know what to do. You end up doing something wrong. That's why he says, the demonic does not know what to do and what to refrain from. So they just make the wrong decisions. There's no purity or a right conduct, and there's no truth in them. So in the description of this demonic person now, we recognize the picture of an utterly skeptical materialist, a person who looks at life from his own limited intellectual standpoint. And obviously, this person fails to recognize any final purpose on permanent substratum. That's the truth. Ultimate truth is talking about. They don't see that. What do they say, these kind of a people? Verse number 8, he says, they say the universe is without truth. That means without a substratum, without any divine power. Without moral basis, without a God, brought about mere mutual union with lust for its cause. What else? They say, what else is there? Okay. Man and woman meet, and then that's how this creation happens. They don't see the truth behind it. So according to these people, there's no such director of events, no architect of happenings. There is no creator, no sustainer. And after describing the point of view of the pure materialist, Lord Krishna sympathizes with these people and their deeds. Next verse, he says, holding this view, these ruined souls of small intellect and fierce deeds come forth as the enemies of the world for its destruction. They're so arrogant. Their thinking is so narrow, so selfish, they destroy this world from the selfishness. Nashtatmana alap buddhya. We are over here to enlarge our intellect, broaden our horizon, as we say. They just think narrowly, everything about themselves. They destroy others. When a materialist works in ignorance of his own divine status, he naturally behaves as though he is an animal, insulting the divine status of his own evolution also. And the viewpoint of life of a materialist and his motives in his everyday life are beautifully described in the following verse. Verse number 10. Filled with insatiable desires, full of hypocrisy, pride and arrogance, holding evil ideas through delusion, they work with impure resolves. Because when the desires are so many, they don't mind going the wrong way, the impure resolve. Activities are not at all possible unless they are instigated by desires. To sustain life only for the satisfaction of desires is unintelligent. Because desires, they have a knack of multiplying themselves. The more we satisfy, the more they multiply. Desire cannot come to the all fulfilled. When you feel fulfilled, and this fulfillment comes only when we connect with God. When we are connected with the Maya, these desires keep on multiplying. That's why they say to the all fulfilled, how can there be desire prompted attachment? We learned that in the Mandukya Upanishad. Desire can come only to one who fails to feel his own infinitude and expresses himself as a limited ego, forgetting our own divine nature. In our identification with the unreal things and values of life, a person develops in oneself a hunger to enjoy peace and happiness. We think that outer world can make us happy because we really don't know the ocean of bliss which is residing within us. Verse number 11. Giving themselves over to immeasurable cares, ending only with death, regarding gratifications of lust as their highest aim, and feeling sure that that is all. That means that's all matters. Only the worldly things matter. They keep on struggling to acquire. And while they are struggling, there's anxiety in preserving the acquired objects of desires. They just waste entire lifetime in such anxieties, and to realize in the end only how miserably one has failed. And that is a tragedy. To them, satisfaction of their lusty nature is all the goal of life, and there's nothing beyond it. So this is a philosophy of atheists. And this is what Lord Krishna is telling us. And the expression of the above philosophy in the life of the individual is described in the following verse, verse number 12. What really happens when you have a philosophy like this? Bound by 100 ties of hope, given to lust and anger, they strive to obtain by unlawful means hoards of wealth for sensual enjoyment. So Lord Krishna is recording the activities of such a person because they are entangled with hundreds of desires. So this person's mental and intellectual energy will get dissipated. The energy which is supposed to move from the bottom to the all the way up, they just dissipate it. Such an individual becomes restless and impatient with things that happen around him, and soon loses his balance of the mind, his sense of judgment. We all know that wherever desire is throttled, anger is must. So they tirelessly and diligently strive to satisfy their ever-increasing urges. Continuing, the Lord paints the attitude of such people to life. He says in verse number 13, this today has been gained by me. This desire I shall obtain. This is mine, and this wealth shall also be mine in future. There is not much in this verse that calls for explanation, actually. In fact, the whole demonic nature, nobody has to explain it to us. Average man of the world today lives exactly the life suggested here. We can somehow relate to it in this Kali Yuga. And the laughable paradox in the philosophy of possession is that the more one has, the more one craves for. One gets drunk with the vanity of possession. So the previous verse, the verse number 13, painted the materialist's attitude to the physical things around him. In the next verse, verse number 14, he is giving us his attitude towards the world of beings also. So not just towards the things, but the beings. So he says that enemy has been slain by me. and others also I shall destroy. And these enemies could be your competitors at work or at home or anywhere. Enemies don't mean only in the war zone. That enemy has been slain by me, and others also I shall destroy. I am the Lord. I am the enjoyer. I am perfect, powerful, and happy. We can see that a lot of businessmen in the world, unknown to themselves, constantly chant this stanza in their hearts. Okay, I have taken over that position. I have taken over that company. I'm the most successful person. I am the strong and in influence in my capital, in my business connections, and even in my bank balance. And personally, they say, I am healthy right now. So you say, ego is a song of success that is ever humming in the heart of a true materialist. And what is the intellectual estimate of a materialist about himself? Verse number 15. See how beautifully this picture has been painted. Hard to imagine that it was written more than 5,000 years ago. I am rich and well born. Who else is equal to me? I will sacrifice. I will give money. I will rejoice. So even in helping the others, there is a vanity. I. Thus are they deluded by ignorance, Lord Krishna says. He feels happy and congratulates himself on his high birth and breed, on his belongings and wealth, and fails to find anyone equal to him. He gloats that he will, by his ritualisms, even order the God. God will have to listen to me because I'm giving so much. Summarizing these last 3 verses, Lord Krishna says in verse number 16, bewildered by many offensive, entangled in the snare of delusion, addicted to the gratification of lust, they fall into a foul hell. And hell doesn't mean after death. This hell could be right here. It's a state of mind. When you cannot sleep at night. When you feel angry, anxious, that's it, hellish. His power of judgment and discrimination is caught up in a web of delusions and false values. A subjectively shattered personality cannot find peace or fulfillment in any situation. This is what Lord Krishna is telling us. And characteristics of such people and their yagyas, because he did mention sacrifice. Sacrifice means yagyas, the ritualisms. Number 17, self-conceited, stubborn, filled with pride and intoxication of wealth, they perform yagyas in a name only, out of ostentation, contrary to scriptural ordinance. When we do the yagyas, when we do the ritualism, or when we do the charity, it should not be known to anybody else. We should not have our names written on the walls of the temples of the churches or in the newspapers. According to Lord Krishna, that's ostentation. Contrary to the scriptural ordinance. Yajante nam yagyet dambhen avidhi purvakam. Continuation of this in verse number 18, given over to egoism, power, haughtiness, lust, and anger. These malicious people hate me in their own bodies. Because God resides in all the bodies, as a soul, as a spirit. They don't even want to listen to that. And he says, and in those of others also, no respect for others. Ahankaram, balam darpam, kamam, krodham cha samshrita, mam atam pardeheshu pradvishanta abhyasuyeka. And the consequence of disrespecting all cultural values and living an uncultural, egocentric existence of passions and desires would be nothing short of total destruction of life. So unethical values and immoral intentions choke the great melody of life. Verse number 19, Lord Krishna says, these cruel haters, worst among men in the world, I hurl these evil doers forever into the womb of the demons only. The sansar is, the basis of the sansar is the karmas. So if we do karmas like that, and karmas we don't do only physically, they are our thoughts also, our words also. So based on that, because if our actions are, our karmas are demonic, where will we go? In the demonic wombs. Endlessly means, that doesn't mean forever, but until somebody improves. So the law of action and reaction orders that such cruel people again and again reach similar wounds until the sheer horror of their experiences bring home to them a sudden realization of the follies. Verse number 20, entering into demonic wombs and deluded in birth after birth, not attaining to me, they fall into a condition still lower than that. So that means they sink lower and lower to reach the bottom grades of beings. Now in the next verse, describing the technique of hastening our own evolution, Lord Krishna says, these three are the gates of hell. So it's kind of a summarizing for us. Even though he gave us a long list of demonic qualities, but he says these three, remember. These three are the gates of hell, destructive of the self. Lust, anger, and greed. We can at least, if we cannot memorize all those, we can memorize these three. And he says, therefore, one should abandon these three. Lust, anger, and greed. Three gateways to reach hell, where there is desire. Anger is a natural corollary. Okay, so it starts with the calm desire. If anger is the thought storm arising in our mind at the disappointment of a desire, greed is the erosion of the mental strength and inner peace. Greed is a sense of dissatisfaction, which is constantly pursuing and poisoning the sense of satisfaction. That's why they say that a person was a millionaire. He was very content. I have plenty of money. Millionaire. Until he met a billionaire. That's a greed. Okay? Contentment goes away when we lose this perspective. So here follows the praise of his renunciation of ego, anger, and greed. A man who is liberated from these three gates to darkness, verse number 22, practices what is good for him and thus goes to supreme goal. So these three gates to the hell, if we can avoid these three, we are moving towards the supreme goal. That's how important it is. Those who are avoiding all the three gates to hell are complimented here in this verse. To wander into the fields of desire, anger, and greed is to dissipate our energies. So this particular verse explains to the seeker what is to be avoided by him and indicates how he will thereby have a positive development in the inner growth. Because as human beings, we need to know, what will I get if I work so hard? So he says, this is what you will get. You will start moving towards the supreme goal. It's almost like somebody says, avoid bad food. But then they got to tell us that if I avoid bad food, I will preserve health. Health, happiness. So avoiding the dissipation of our energy through desire, greed, and anger and greed would perhaps end all our agitations caused by these three. But how will that create a positive development in ourselves? He says the positive way of life. So like avoid the junk food, but then we got to eat the nutritious food. So avoid these negative tendencies, cultivate the positive qualities which he mentioned in the first three verses. That's what he's preaching us. So positive achievement, which is good for us. So that's why he says, Acharati atmana shreyaha tata yati param gatim. In this verse number 22. And what is the positive practice? Further he says in verse number 23, he who, having cast aside the ordinances of the scriptures, acts under the impulse of desire, attains not perfection, nor happiness, nor the supreme goal. So the textbooks discussing the theory of truth, which is called the Brahma Vidya, it's a Shastra within Brahma Vidya. The techniques of self-perfection, the yoga, are called Shastra, the scriptures. Sure, there are a lot of subsidiary books also, which will explain these prime scriptures. Those are called Prakaran texts. Okay, so that's why studying of the scriptures is recommended here by Lord Krishna himself too. And what exactly would be the harm if a person did not live according to the way of life advocated in the scriptures? The consequence of such an unintelligent disregard of the right way of life is clearly indicated here. This person cannot feel any happiness or attain any cultural development. See, that's what he's saying. No happiness, nor the supreme goal, and no development. And the natural conclusion in verse number 24, he says, therefore, after giving all this, the characteristics of good, the characteristics of not so good, and what happens when we follow this? He says, therefore, let the scriptures be your authority in determining what ought to be done and what not to be done. Having known what is said in the ordinance of the scriptures, you should act here. Here means in the world. So he is emphasizing the scriptures. The word for scriptures is Shastra. Tasmat Shastram Parmanam Te Karye Akarye Vivastita. So seeker must follow the authority of the scriptures in planning his way of life. Scriptures have the authority. The right conduct in life can be determined only when a person has correct knowledge of what to be pursued and what is to be avoided. See, any kind of the knowledge we need, we have the books. All the secular education, we have the books. So that's why the sacred education also, we have the books. So that's why it's highly recommended that we study the scriptures. And this is called a Brahm Vidya. A correct knowledge and a clear intellectual vision of the goal and a direction in which it lies, and of the possible difficulties on the route which can come. And those difficulties could be unavoidable, but we need to know how to avoid them. And what are the prerequisites to walk on this path? So that's why he said, you should act here. Okay, we got to work. Work we must do. But what to do, what not to do, and how to do, when to do, this is all we learn from the scriptures. We'll say we know the scriptures. We have read the scriptures, but have we studied the scriptures? It's not just reading Gita, reading Ramayana, reading the Bible, reading other scriptures, studying them. Because he said, man should act here according to that. Can we say what I'm doing? Whatever I'm doing, it is prescribed by the scriptures. Do we know the right way of living? So we'll see in the next chapter, Arjuna asks a question. If somebody did not get a chance to study the scriptures, but just have a faith, what will happen to that kind of a person? That's why in the next chapter's title is Shraddha Tre Vibhaga. Shraddha means of faith. Faith in God, but did not study the scriptures. Did not get a chance to study the scripture. What will happen? So we'll look at that next week. Let's stop it here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much for coming, and I'll see you next.